Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. Imagine, if you will, a ship. But not just any ship. We're talking about the absolute largest, most imposing vessel built by a young empire just bursting onto the global scene. Now, picture that same ship, loaded down with the single greatest haul of treasure that empire would ever capture. Gold, jewels, priceless artifacts. A fortune so vast it could literally change the course of a nation's history overnight.
We're talking potential billions in today's money, easily. All crammed onto this one magnificent but, well, deeply flawed floating fortress.
And then it vanishes.
Utterly. Swallowed by a ferocious storm somewhere off the coast of Sumatra 500 years ago. This is the story of the Flor de la Mar, the flower of the sea.
It's arguably the single greatest maritime disaster, certainly in terms of value, for the Portuguese Empire during its golden age of discovery.
Oh, without a doubt. The loss was so immediate, so total, that the ship basically became legend the moment it went down. A ghost ship carrying a phantom fortune.
So today, we're going to try and trace that ghost. We want to understand the sheer ambition that led Portugal to build such a colossal yet unstable vessel in the first place.
And the conquest that filled its holds with that legendary treasure.
Exactly. And then why, after half a millennium, the search for this wreck is tangled in this incredibly complex web of international disputes, legal battles. It's a mess.
It really is. 3 nations, at least, laying claim before anything's even found.
So what were those flaws? Why build it like that? And why, crucially, were the warnings apparently ignored for so long?
To get that, you really have to understand Portugal at that precise moment, early 1500s. It's everything.
Right, set the scene for us. What was happening?
Okay, so Portugal is gripped by this exploration fever. It's electric. They've just done the seemingly impossible. They've sailed around the Cape of Good Hope.
The bottom of Africa.
Exactly. And cracked open a direct sea road into the Indian Ocean. This wasn't just exploration for the sake of it. This was about fundamentally changing the global economy.
Bypassing the old land routes, the Silk Road, the Venetian and Ottoman control.
Precisely. For centuries, Asian goods, especially spices, had to trickle through this complex, expensive, and politically treacherous network. Suddenly, Portugal has the key to bypass all of that, go straight to the source.
And the main prize, the thing driving all this risk and investment, it wasn't just about finding new lands, was it? It was about trade, specifically the spice trade.
The spice trade was the oil of the 16th century. Seriously. You think of cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, pepper, now as, nice additions to cooking.
Things in little jars in the kitchen cupboard.
Right. But back then, they were strategic commodities, absolutely essential. For preserving food, especially meat, think about life before refrigeration. Crucial for medicine, too, in their understanding.
And status symbols, I imagine, for the wealthy.
Oh, hugely. Exotic flavors were in high demand among Europe's elite, so controlling the spice trade meant controlling unbelievable wealth. The profit margins were astronomical.
Give us a sense of that. How profitable are we talking?
Okay, consider pepper, just basic black pepper. By the time it got from India, through all the middlemen, to a market in Venice or Genoa, the price could have inflated by, say, 800,000%, sometimes more. Portugal cuts out the middlemen.
They keep almost all of that profit.
Exactly. A single successful voyage, one ship like a Carrack returning fully laden from India, could generate enough profit to fund major military operations back home, or even potentially cover a huge chunk of the entire state budget for a year.
Wow. Okay, so the stakes were incredibly high.
Immense. Whoever controlled that tap controlled a fire hose of cash, which in turn funded more ships, more soldiers, more expansion. It was a self-fueling engine of empire.
But to project power that far, across hostile oceans, fighting local powers, they needed more than just merchant ships, right? They needed something that could fight back.
Absolutely. And that's where the Carrack comes in. It was the perfect instrument for this early phase of aggressive expansion.
What made them so special?
They were big, sturdy, deep-holed ships designed for long ocean voyages and heavy cargo. But crucially, they had these really high sides and, most distinctively, these massive multi-deck castles built up at the front, the forecastle, and especially at the back, the stern castle.
Like floating towers.
Kind of, yeah. These weren't just for show. They were fighting platforms. They gave Portuguese soldiers and cannons a height advantage over most other ships they'd encounter in the Indian Ocean. They allowed them to dominate engagements, rain down fire. They were built to intimidate and to win.
And within this fleet of powerful Carracks, one stood out. The Flor de la Mar, launched in Lisbon 1502.
She was intended to be the crown jewel, a true statement piece. Most Carracks at the time were maybe, 150, 200, perhaps 250 tons burden. That's a measure of cargo capacity.
Okay.
The Flor de la Mar, she clocked in at over 400 tons. She was enormous for her era, almost double the size of many other ships in the fleet.
Why so big? Just bragging rights.
Partly, perhaps, symbolism was definitely important. She was meant to be this floating embodiment of Portuguese power, this massive fortress that would just awe potential rivals into submission simply by sailing into view.
And there's always a but in these stories, isn't there?
There usually is.
Yeah.
Despite the grandeur, the ambition maybe got ahead of the shipbuilding technology of the day. Sources from the time chronicles, letters, even official reports, they paint a pretty consistent picture.
Of problems.
Yeah. Big problems. That sheer size made her apparently very unwieldy, difficult to steer, hard to maneuver, especially in anything less than ideal weather. Those tall castles, great for fighting, acted like sails themselves, catching the wind and making her a pig to handle.
Okay, so difficult to sail. Annoying, but maybe manageable.
But it gets worse. The real issue, the one that comes up again and again in the accounts, was structural. She leaked. Badly. Constantly. Reports suggest her massive hull was prone to severe straining, especially in heavy seas. Think about the immense distances she was sailing: Lisbon, around Africa, to India, Southeast Asia, back again, thousands and thousands of miles.
That's putting incredible stress on the timbers, the whole structure.
Exactly. She needed constant back-breaking work just to keep her reasonably watertight. Frequent, often emergency stops for repairs, for careening hauling her onto a beach to scrape the hull and caulk the seams. These repairs weren't just inconvenient. They delayed vital military missions, cost a fortune in time and resources.
And this was known, like, right in the beginning.
It seems so. The problems appear to have plagued her throughout her nearly decade-long service life before the final voyage. Captains complained. Officials noted the issues.
Which begs the obvious question. If she was such a known liability, this massive, leaky, hard-to-handle ship, why keep her in service? Especially on these high-stakes, long-distance routes, why not, retire her to coastal duties or break her up?
That's where you hit the wall of imperial ambition and, frankly, economics. Firstly, the cost. Building a 400-ton Carrack was an eye-wateringly expensive undertaking, a huge investment for the Portuguese crown, which was already stretching its resources thin funding this massive overseas enterprise.
So, writing her off would have been a massive financial hit and a public admission of a very expensive failure.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And secondly, the symbolism. She was the biggest. She was often the flagship. Taking her out of service would have been perceived as weakness, a blow to Portugal's image as the new masters of the sea.
So she was deemed too valuable a vessel to keep in port, not because she was reliable, but because her symbolic and financial value outweighed the clear known risks.
That seems to be the calculation they made. So for 9 years, she sailed on, always needing patches, always groaning under strain, a magnificent, flawed giant just waiting.
Waiting for the moment when the pressure became too much.
And that moment was coming. Fueled by the ruthless drive of one of Portugal's most famous or infamous commanders and the lure of the richest prize in Asia.
Malacca, 1511.
The game changer. Portugal had established footholds in India, but Malacca, on the Malay Peninsula, that was different. That was the nexus.
Why was it so critical geographically?
Location, location, location.
Yeah.
Malacca sits right on the narrow strait, the Strait of Malacca that connects the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. All the trade flowing west from China, Japan, the Spice Islands, silks, porcelain, cloves, nutmeg had to pass through there to reach India, the Middle East, and eventually Europe, and vice versa for goods going east.
It was the ultimate bottleneck.
Absolutely, the indispensable hub. You control Malacca, you essentially control the flow of the most valuable goods on the planet at that time. It was the Singapore or the Dubai of its day, but even more critical.
And the man tasked with seizing this prize was Afonso de Albuquerque, a major figure in Portuguese expansion.
Probably the key architect of the Portuguese maritime empire, the Estado de India. He wasn't just a conqueror. He was a strategist, an administrator, and utterly ruthless when he needed to be.
He was under pressure too, right, back in Lisbon.
Huge pressure. He had political rivals undermining him, questioning his methods. He needed a spectacular success to solidify his position and justify his aggressive policies. Taking Malacca wasn't just a strategic goal, it was a political necessity for him.
And the campaign itself, July, August 1511.
Fierce fighting. The Malaccan Sultanate was powerful and well defended. But Albuquerque was relentless. He besieged the city, exploited internal divisions, and eventually, after bloody street battles, Malacca fell.
And the spoils. The sources suggest it was beyond anything the Portuguese had ever seen.
Unprecedented. This wasn't just random looting. This was the systematic seizure of the accumulated wealth of arguably the richest trading city in the world at that point. Albuquerque confiscated the Sultan's entire royal treasury, raided the warehouses packed with goods from across Asia, demanded tribute.
We need to paint a picture of this. What kind of treasure are we talking about specifically? The sources give details, right?
They do, and they're staggering. Obviously, vast quantities of gold and silver coins, chests overflowing. But it's the other stuff that really captures the imagination.
Like the jewels.
Yes. One account, a letter written shortly after, describes jewels sparkling like captured stars. Huge quantities of raw, unworked gold. And pearls. The sources specifically mention pearls the size of pigeons' eggs.
Pigeons' eggs? Seriously?
That's the description, signifying immense value and generations of accumulated royal wealth. Then you have precious artifacts plundered from the Sultan's palace and possibly temples, golden goblets, daggers inlaid with gems, intricately carved ivory.
And the trade goods.
Thousands upon thousands of bolts of the finest silks, some reportedly interwoven with actual silver thread, representing that flow of wealth from Ming China, spices, porcelain. Just an unbelievable concentration of courtable, high-value wealth.
What's the estimated value? In today's terms, are we still talking billions?
It's hard to give an exact figure, but estimates based on the reported cruzados at the time, conservatively translated into modern purchasing power, yes, you're almost certainly looking at multiple billions of dollars, possibly much more, depending on how you value the unique artifacts. It was, quite simply, the jackpot.
The ultimate proof of victory for Albuquerque to send back to King Manuel I in Lisbon. Proof that would silence his critics and cement Portugal's dominance.
Exactly. He needed to get this treasure back home, and crucially, he needed to get it back quickly and impressively.
And the ship he chose to carry the bulk of this monumental, legacy-defining treasure.
He chose the Flor de la Mar.
The 400-ton, leaky, unwieldy, structurally compromised Flor de la Mar.
That's the one. It seems almost unbelievable in hindsight, doesn't it?
It really does. Why? Why that ship, given its history?
It seems to boil down to one thing: capacity. She was the only vessel there with holds large enough to take the lion's share of the treasure in one go. Albuquerque likely didn't want to split the prize across multiple smaller, potentially more seaworthy ships.
Why not? Safety in numbers, surely.
Perhaps, but also risk of dispersion, maybe loss of some parts, delays, and critically, sending it all back on the largest ship in the fleet made a much bigger statement. It screamed absolute victory, overwhelming success. He needed that single massive consignment to arrive in Lisbon and just drop jaws.
So immediate political expediency and the sheer desire for maximum impact trumped years of known structural issues and seamanship concerns.
It appears so. The lure of the prize, the pressure to deliver, the symbolism, it all converged on this one fateful decision. Load the treasure onto the biggest, most prestigious, yet most vulnerable ship available.
And they didn't just load it, did they? The accounts suggest they overloaded it.
Dangerously so, it seems. They weren't just filling the designated cargo holds. Reports claim they packed treasure into every conceivable space. There are accounts, perhaps slightly embellished over time but reflecting a core truth, of crew members whispering about the decks groaning audibly, the timber straining under the sheer dead weight of chests filled with gold and silver.
Pushing it far, far beyond any reasonable safety limit.
Absolutely. It wasn't just the weight of the cargo itself, but the weight of expectation, the weight of the empire's ambition, all pressing down on a ship whose seams were already, metaphorically and literally, starting to split.
It's an almost unbearable image. This magnificent, flawed creation, already carrying the seeds of its own doom for years, now laden with a treasure so vast it virtually guaranteed that doom would find it. Its fate was sealed before it even left Malacca.
The voyage began in November 1511. The Flor de la Mar, stuffed the gunwales with treasure, set sail from Malacca, heading west and north, initially towards Portuguese India. She wasn't alone. Several smaller escort ships accompanied her.
Carrying Albuquerque's triumphant reports, no doubt.
And Albuquerque himself initially was on the Flor de la Mar, too. They were sailing through the Strait of Malacca, waters they now ostensibly controlled.
But the strait is known for unpredictable weather, isn't it? Especially between monsoons.
Extremely. And according to the accounts, they sailed straight into disaster. Not a gradual decline, but a sudden, violent storm. A classic tropical tempest.
The kind that can whip up mountainous waves and ferocious winds in minutes.
Exactly. And the Flor de la Mar, overloaded, top-heavy, difficult to handle even in moderate conditions. She was tragically, fatally exposed.
This is where all those years of ignored warnings, the fundamental design flaws, came home to roost, wasn't it?
Catastrophically so. Those high castles that were meant for fighting, they caught the wind like barn doors, putting immense strain on the masts and rigging. The sheer weight of the cargo, deep in the holds, likely shifted violently in the massive waves.
That's on the leaky hull.
The immense stress on the already compromised timbers must have been unimaginable. Seems that constantly wept, probably burst open. Water wouldn't have just seeped in, it would have poured into the holds.
Trying to bail that out would be like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket.
Futile. And the weight of the treasure, combined with the rapidly accumulating water inside the hull, just pulled her down faster. She became a death trap.
The accounts speak of chaos. Breaking apart around them.
Yes, the surviving accounts, though brief, paint a picture of swift and total disaster for the ship itself.
Yeah.
She either struck reefs near the coast of Sumatra or simply foundered and broke up under the onslaught of the waves.
And the treasure. The billions in gold, jewels, artifacts.
Gone. Swallowed by the sea. The vast majority of it, especially the heavy chests of bullion and coins, sank instantly, scattering across the seabed or being quickly buried by the currents and shifting sands.
But crucially, Albuquerque survived.
He did. He, along with some other crew members, managed to escape the wreck, apparently clinging to debris or being picked up by one of the escort vessels that somehow rode out the storm.
His survival is key to the legend, isn't it? If everyone had died, it might just be another lost ship.
Absolutely. He lived to report the loss, to lament the vanished fortune. But more than that, the fact that there were survivors, but their stories didn't perfectly align, that's where the mystery really begins.
Conflicting accounts right from the start.
Exactly. Some survivors apparently claim that maybe a small portion of the treasure, perhaps lighter items or chests that floated free, might have been salvaged immediately after by the escort ships, or even recovered by local Sumatrans who would have inevitably descended on the wreck site.
Okay, so maybe not everything was lost.
But other accounts insisted the sinking was so sudden, so violent, that nothing of real value could possibly have been saved. Especially the tons of gold and silver, which would have sunk like tons of gold and silver, straight to the bottom.
And that ambiguity was at a total loss or just a near total loss? That's the seed of the whole 5th-century treasure hunt.
Precisely. It created just enough uncertainty, just enough room for doubt and speculation to fuel dreams of finding the main hoard. Did a few chests get away, or is the bulk of it still down there waiting? That question has echoed down the centuries.
The greatest naval power of the age loses its single biggest prize, practically within sight of land, and can't even be 100% sure what sank and what didn't. That guarantees immortality, doesn't it?
It guarantees the Flor de la Mar would sail straight into myth, a ghost ship laden with a legendary and perhaps partly imaginary cargo.
So Portugal didn't just give up, right? They must have tried to get it back.
Oh, they tried. The loss was far too staggering to just write off. Reports suggest initial salvage attempts were organized relatively quickly. But you have to remember the technology available in 1511, 1512.
Pretty basic, I imagine.
Extremely.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like lowering weighted ropes with hooks, hoping to snag something. Employing local freedivers who could hold their breath for maybe a minute or two in what were likely dangerous currents and poor visibility.
Against a 400-ton wreck, potentially breaking up and being buried in sand and silt.
Completely inadequate. The wreck site, especially in the dynamic environment of the Strait of Malacca, was probably completely buried or scattered beyond recognition within a few years, certainly within a couple of decades. The sea reclaimed it very quickly.
And as the physical possibility of recovery faded, the story grew.
Exactly. History blurred into folklore. You had conflicting reports in official chronicles back in Portugal. Colonial administrators debated for generations whether local communities had secretly salvaged large parts of the treasure over time.
Which probably led to local legends, too.
Absolutely. Stories emerged about cursed artifacts taken from Malaccan temples being responsible for the sinking. And those persistent tales among local fishermen, passed down through generations, about hearing strange noises from the depths during storms and the groaning of her timbers. The ship became a fixture of the region's maritime mythology.
But the modern search isn't based on groaning timbers. It's high-tech now. Sonar, magnetometers.
Right. The 20th and 21st centuries brought renewed hope, driven by technology that can actually peer beneath the seabed. But even finding it is only half the battle. First, you need a working theory of how it sank and where the main debris field might be.
And there are basically two competing ideas on that front.
Broadly speaking, yes. They have huge implications for whether there's even a concentrated treasure to find.
Okay, lay them out for us. Theory 1.
Theory 1, dispersal and absorption. This is often favored by maritime archaeologists who emphasize the violence of the storm and the likely structural failure of the ship before it even hit the bottom or the coast.
Meaning it broke up significantly while still afloat or on impact.
Precisely. If the ship shattered over a wide area, the cargo, especially lighter items, would have been scattered across potentially miles of seabed and coastline. In this scenario, much of the recoverable non-bullion wealth, ivory, silks, maybe smaller caches of coins, could easily have washed ashore over time.
And been picked up by locals.
Exactly. Recovered piecemeal over decades, perhaps centuries, absorbed into the local economy, melted down, traded away, vanishing into the fabric of Southeast Asian history. If this theory is right, there is no single billion-dollar hoard waiting to be found. It's long gone, dispersed like dust.
A much less exciting prospect for treasure hunters.
Much less. It implies the search is more about finding scattered archaeological evidence than a Hollywood-style treasure chest.
Okay, so what's the alternative? The one that keeps the hope alive?
Theory 2. Intact burial. This theory posits that while the ship certainly broke up, the main section of the hull, the heaviest part containing the bulk of the gold and silver stored deep inside, might have settled relatively intact.
How could that happen in such a violent sinking?
The key here is the environment of the Strait of Malacca. It's known for extremely high rates of sedimentation. Rivers dump tons of silt. Currents constantly shift sandbanks. The idea is that the heavy hull section could have sunk quickly and been rapidly covered, smothered by layers of sand and mud, maybe within just a few years.
Creating a kind of protective seal.
Exactly. Sealed off from currents, oxygen, and early salvage attempts. If this happened, then the core of the treasure, the non-perishable gold, silver, jewels, could still be relatively concentrated, preserved in this anaerobic environment, essentially entombed beneath the seabed.
A 16th century time capsule filled with billions in treasure.
That's the dream. That's the theory that fuels the multi-million-dollar expeditions with their sophisticated sonar gear designed to penetrate those layers of sediment. They're not just looking for wreckage on the seafloor. They're looking for a massive anomaly below it.
Has any expedition come close? Have they found definitive proof?
There have been numerous searches, some claims of finding potential sites, intriguing sonar readings, but the exact location remains unconfirmed. The search area is vast, the conditions are difficult, and, well, there's the other huge problem.
The politics, the legal nightmare.
That's putting it mildly. It's become this incredible diplomatic minefield. The moment anyone even hints they might have found something, or even starts a serious search in a promising area, the ownership disputes flare up immediately. It stops things dead in their tracks.
Before a single coin is brought up.
Long before. It makes the Flor de la Mar almost unique. It's not just about finding the wreck, it's about navigating the claims of at least 3 nations, each with a passionate and arguably legitimate case.
Okay, let's break those down. First up, Malaysia. What's their argument?
Malaysia's claim is rooted in history and cultural heritage. They argue the treasure was plunder, violently stolen from the Sultanate of Malacca, a historical precursor to modern Malaysia. Therefore, the treasure represents looted cultural property that should be returned to its rightful origin.
So it's not just about the money, it's about restitution for a historical wrong.
Exactly. They see the sinking as a kind of historical accident that prevented the stolen goods from leaving the region, and modern international principles regarding looted heritage should apply. It's a powerful moral and historical argument.
Okay. Then there's Indonesia. Their claim is different.
Indonesia's claim is primarily geographical, based on international maritime law. Given the most likely sinking locations off the coast of Sumatra, the wreck almost certainly lies within Indonesia's territorial waters, or at the very least, its exclusive economic zone.
Easy. So finders keepers isn't the rule here.
Not when it comes to state vessels or significant archaeological finds within territorial waters. Indonesia argues that under established maritime law, like the UNESCO Convention on Underwater Cultural Heritage, though not all parties have ratified it equally, finds within their waters fall under their national jurisdiction and control. It's a claim based on sovereignty and internationally recognized sea boundaries.
And finally, the original owner, Portugal.
Portugal maintains that the Flor de la Mar was a vessel of the Portuguese crown, effectively a state ship operating under official orders. They argue that under principles of sovereign immunity, the ship and its contents remain the property of the Portuguese state, regardless of where it sank or how much time has passed.
So their property, lost at sea, still belongs to them.
That's their position. They view the treasure as part of their national heritage, intrinsically linked to their history of exploration and empire. They haven't relinquished their claim to it.
Wow. So you have historical restitution versus territorial sovereignty versus original ownership and sovereign immunity. That's intractable.
It's incredibly complex, and it perfectly highlights this fundamental tension in modern underwater exploration. Is the goal treasure hunting recovery for profit, which often risks destroying the archaeological context? Or is it maritime archaeology, careful study, preservation, understanding the site as a piece of cultural heritage, regardless of monetary value?
And with the Flor de la Mar, the potential monetary value is so astronomically high, it just intensifies that conflict.
Immensely. Any private salvage company would face immediate legal challenges from potentially 3 governments. Any government-led expedition risks diplomatic incidents. It ensures that even if the wreck is precisely located tomorrow, the fight over who gets to control the site, interpret the findings, and ultimately possess any recovered artifacts could drag on for years, maybe decades.
Keeping the treasure effectively locked away even after it's found.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
It's perhaps the most legally and politically radioactive shipwreck on the planet.
So beyond the treasure, beyond the legal battles, what does the Flor de la Mar represent today? What's its enduring legacy?
Well, it's become this incredibly potent symbol, hasn't it? A true parable, really.
A parable about what? Greed. Ambition.
All of the above.
Uh-huh.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale about imperial hubris. Here's the Portuguese Empire, right at the peak of its early power, achieving this stunning conquest, seizing this unimaginable wealth.
And then, in their eagerness to display it, to consolidate it, they make this fatally flawed decision. They push too hard, ignore the warnings.
And nature delivers this swift, brutal rebuke. A single storm humbles the mighty empire, snatches away its greatest prize. It's a stark reminder that ambition, especially when blinded by greed and overconfidence, can lead directly to disaster. Caution gets thrown overboard.
And that interpretation can shift too, can it? Depending on who's telling the story.
Absolutely. For Portugal, historically, it's the ghost of lost glory, the treasure that got away, the ultimate symbol of misfortune striking at their zenith. But from a Malaysian perspective, for instance, the sinking isn't a tragedy for Portugal. It's often seen almost as a form of justice, or as cosmic irony, the sea preventing the stolen wealth from leaving.
It's fascinating how one event can hold such different meanings. How does it compare to other famous treasure wrecks, like the Spanish galleons?
It's often mentioned alongside ships like the Nuestra Señora de Atocha, found by Mel Fisher, which yielded incredible treasure, but also involved controversial salvage methods. Or the San Jose, the Spanish galleon located off Colombia, which is currently locked in its own fierce legal battle.
But the Flor de la Mar feels different somehow.
I think it does. Partly because the Atocha was largely recovered, solving much of its mystery. The San Jose has been definitively located. The Flor de la Mar. Her power lies in her continued absence, in the uncertainty.
The fact that this colossal treasure might still be down there, intact but hidden.
Exactly. She is the ultimate symbol of the possibility that lingers, the treasure that remains tantalizingly out of reach, perhaps forever. That ambiguity is what fuels the legend, what keeps people searching and dreaming. She hasn't given up her secret yet.
Other wrecks have treasure, but she is the treasure in a way. The mystery itself is the prize.
You could certainly argue that. The sheer scale, biggest ship of its kind, biggest treasure haul, catastrophic failure, enduring mystery. It's a unique combination.
So we followed the story from Portugal's imperial ambitions, through the bloody conquest of Malacca, onto the overloaded decks of that flawed Carrack, into the storm off Sumatra, and through 5 centuries of searching and conflict.
It's a journey that really encapsulates so much about empire, ambition, risk, and the sheer enduring power of the sea.
So the final thought then. If, and it's a big if the Flor de la Mar were definitively found tomorrow, if sonar pierced the sediment and revealed that hull, what then?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Would the actual discovery, the tangible proof, finally break the legal deadlock? Would the immense historical and archaeological value, the chance to study an almost perfectly preserved capsule of 16th century maritime life and colonial conquest, somehow lead to cooperation?
Or would finding it just pour gasoline on the fire?
That's the fear. Would seeing the gold, the artifacts, simply intensify the national claims, deepen the arguments about heritage, ownership, and restitution? Would the fight over the prize completely overshadow the lessons the wreck might teach us? The sea judged the treasure too great for one empire back then. Would modern nations prove any wiser?
Perhaps the greatest legends are the ones that resist easy answers, the ones where the final chapter can't quite be written.
The flower of the sea still waits. still guarding her secrets beneath the waves.